The cold steel of handcuffs bit into his wrists. Thrown against the hood of a cruiser, he was just another target for a cop with a badge and a bias. But Officer Tanner made a career-ending mistake today. He didn't know the man and he just assaulted owned the city. The November morning air in the city of Oak Ridge possessed a bitter, damp bite that seemed to seep directly into the bones. The sun had barely crested the jagged skyline of downtown, casting long grey shadows across the West End. This was a neighborhood caught in the agonizing throes of transition. On one corner, boarded-up brick facades whispered stories of generational neglect. On the other, gleaming new artisanal coffee shops and boutique fitness centers signaled the relentless march of gentrification. Donovan Hayes stood at the intersection of Fifth and Elm, his breath pluming in the frigid air. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s, possessing a quiet, commanding presence that usually turned heads in boardrooms. Today, however, he was intentionally dressed down. He wore a faded grey collegiate hoodie, dark sweatpants, and well-worn running shoes. A dark woolen beanie was pulled low over his forehead. 3 days ago, Donovan had orchestrated one of the most stunning political upsets in state history, running on a grassroots campaign focused on police reform, infrastructure, revitalization, and economic equity. The former civil rights attorney had defeated the 3-term incumbent by a razor-thin margin to become the newly elected mayor of Oak Ridge. His face had been on every television screen and newspaper front page for 72 hours, but in a hoodie without his signature-tailored suit and wire-rimmed glasses, standing in the shadow of a decaying low-income housing project, he was virtually unrecognizable. He was just another black man on a cold street corner. Donovan had come to the West End alone, deliberately leaving his security detail and transition team back at his downtown condominium. He needed to see the city as it truly was, unfiltered by the polished lenses of bureaucratic briefings. He was currently inspecting the exterior of a newly funded community center that his predecessor had touted as a triumph, noting the cheap crumbling masonry and the distinct lack of ADA-compliant ramps. He pulled a small leather-bound notebook from his hoodie pocket and began jotting down a few quick observations. 2 blocks away, a distinct black-and-white Ford Police Interceptor idled at a red light. Behind the wheel sat Officer Gregory Tanner. Tanner was a 15-year veteran of the Oak Ridge Police Department, a man whose personnel file was as thick as a phone book, littered with excessive force complaints that the police union had magically made disappear. He was a burly man, with a buzz-cut, a perpetually flushed face, and a world-view entirely constructed from cynicism and deep-seated prejudice. Beside Tanner sat Rookie Officer Ben Miller, a fresh-faced 22-year-old who still possessed the nervous, eager energy of the academy. Miller was tapping a pen against his thigh, watching the quiet streets. "Look at this." Tanner grumbled his voice, a gravelly sneer, as the traffic light turned green. He didn't accelerate immediately. Instead, he pointed a thick, calloused finger toward the intersection of Fifth and Elm. "Right there. Doesn't that just paint a picture?" Miller squinted through the windshield. "The guy on the corner. He's just standing there, Greg." "He's casing the joint," Tanner corrected his tone, dripping with absolute, unearned certainty. "Look at him. Hoodie pulled up, lingering around the new development, taking notes, probably staking out the security cameras for a break-in tonight." "He's writing in a notebook," Miller pointed out tentatively. "Maybe he's a contractor." Tanner let out a harsh, barking laugh. "A contractor? In those rags, kid, you've got a lot to learn about the wildlife in this jungle. People who look like that hanging around this part of town at 7 in the morning aren't looking to build things. They're looking to take things." Without waiting for Miller's response, Tanner slammed his foot on the accelerator. The heavy cruiser surged forward, its engine roaring, before Tanner violently wrenched the steering wheel, pulling the vehicle diagonally across the crosswalk and jumping the curb right in front of Donovan. The screech of tires echoing off the brick buildings was deafening. Donovan didn't flinch. He slowly closed his leather notebook and looked up, his expression unreadable, as the cruiser's flashing red and blue lights painted his face in chaotic strobes. Tanner kicked his door open, stepping out with his hand aggressively resting on the butt of his service weapon. "Hey, you keep your hands where I can see them." Donovan remained perfectly still. He slipped the notebook into his pocket and kept his hands visible, resting them casually at his sides. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" His voice was deep resonant and entirely devoid of the fear Tanner expected and demanded. "I ask the questions," Tanner barked, storming up to Donovan. He stopped mere inches away, attempting to use his physical bulk to intimidate. "What are you doing here?" "I'm looking at this building," Donovan replied evenly. "Taking a walk in my city. Is standing on a public sidewalk a crime now?" "Don't get smart with me, boy." Tanner sneered, the racial slur hanging heavy and ugly in the freezing air. Miller, who had jogged up behind his partner, shifted uncomfortably at the word. "We've had a string of burglaries in this district. You fit the description." Donovan raised an eyebrow. "I fit the description. Which description is that, exactly?" A middle-aged man in a grey sweatshirt, the description of a suspect. Tanner snapped his face, turning a deeper shade of red. He hated when they talked back. He hated the calm, articulate tone this man was using. It felt like a challenge to his authority. "Let's see some ID." Donovan reached toward his back pocket, but paused. A sudden realization washed over him. In his haste to leave the house, unnoticed this morning, he had grabbed his keys and notebook, but left his leather wallet sitting on the marble kitchen island of his condo. "I don't have my identification on me," Donovan said calmly. "I live about 2 miles from here. I'm happy to provide you with my name and address so you can run it through your system." Tanner's eyes lit up with predatory glee. "No ID wandering around a high-value property taking notes. Yeah, you're coming with us." "On what charge?" Donovan asked, his voice hardening, slipping naturally into the authoritative cadence of the high-powered attorney he had been for 2 decades. "You have no probable cause for an arrest. I have committed no crime, nor have you articulated a reasonable suspicion to detain me under the parameters of Terry vs. Ohio. If you run my name—" "Shut up," Tanner roared, stepping forward and shoving Donovan hard in the chest. Donovan stumbled back half a step, absorbing the impact, but his eyes turned to ice. He looked past Tanner to the young rookie. "Officer," Donovan said to Miller, his voice deadly quiet. "I suggest you tell your partner to step back. He is crossing a legal line that will have severe consequences." "Don't you talk to him? You talk to me," Tanner yelled, pulling his handcuffs from his belt. "Turn around. Put your hands behind your back." "Officer Tanner," Donovan said, reading the man's silver name tag. "I am going to comply with your physical demands because I do not want to be shot in the street. But I am telling you clearly, and for the record, that this is an unlawful arrest. I am Donovan Hayes. If you radio your shift commander." Before Donovan could finish the sentence, Tanner grabbed him by the shoulder, spun him around violently, and slammed him face first onto the cold, damp hood of the police cruiser. The impact knocked the wind out of Donovan, and the freezing metal sent a shock through his system. "Greg, wait!" Miller protested, taking a step forward. "He's not resisting. We can just run his name on the terminal." "Back off, Miller," Tanner spat, bringing Donovan's left arm up, painfully high behind his back. The ratcheting sound of the heavy metal handcuffs locking into place echoed down the street. Tanner grabbed the right wrist, forcefully yanking it to meet the left, and clamped the second cuff down. He squeezed the metal tight, making sure the jagged edges bit sharply into Donovan's skin. "Should have brought your ID, buddy," Tanner whispered maliciously into Donovan's ear. "Now you get to see how things work in my town." Donovan pressed his cheek against the icy hood of the car, breathing slowly through his nose to manage the sharp pain in his shoulders. "Your town," Donovan echoed softly. A grim, terrifying smile touched the corners of his lips. "We'll see about that." A few early morning commuters and local residents had started to gather on the sidewalks. A woman in a thick wool coat pulled out her smartphone, the red recording light blinking like a beacon. Another man holding a paper coffee cup shouted, "Hey, leave him alone! He wasn't doing anything!" Tanner puffed out his chest, glaring at the onlookers. "Police business. Keep moving, or you'll all get cited for interfering." He grabbed the chain of Donovan's handcuffs and yanked him upright, practically dragging him toward the rear door of the SUV. He shoved Donovan into the back seat, pushing his head down roughly, and slammed the heavy door shut. The inside of the cruiser smelled of stale sweat, cheap pine air freshener, and old fear. Donovan adjusted himself awkwardly on the hard plastic seat, the tight handcuffs digging deep into his wrists with every movement. Through the thick plexiglass divider, he watched Tanner and Miller climb into the front seats. Miller looked pale. He kept glancing nervously at the rearview mirror, making eye contact with Donovan. "Greg," Miller said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Did you hear the name he gave Donovan Hayes? Are you insane? Do you know who that is?" Tanner threw the cruiser into gear, his face twisted in a smug scowl. "Yeah, I heard him. It's a common name, Miller. You think the new mayor is walking around the West End in a dirty hoodie at 7 in the morning? You think a guy with that kind of money doesn't carry a wallet? It's a bluff. These guys pull this crap all the time. They throw out a big name, hoping you'll get scared and let them walk. Well, I don't scare." "But what if it is him?" Miller insisted, his voice cracking slightly. "Then I'll gladly write a citation to the mayor for loitering and resisting." Tanner laughed harshly. "Now hit the siren. Let's get this piece of garbage back to the 4th Precinct." The ride was agonizingly long. Tanner drove erratically, taking sharp turns at high speeds, a deliberate tactic designed to toss the handcuffed prisoner around the back seat. Donovan braced his knees against the plastic partition, his jaw clenched in silent endurance. He didn't speak. He didn't complain. He just watched the back of Tanner's head, cataloguing every procedural violation, every insult, every reckless turn. 15 years, Donovan thought. How many innocent men has this officer terrorized in 15 years? How many lives ruined because of a fragile ego and a badge? This, Donovan realized, was exactly why he ran for office. It was one thing to read the statistics about police brutality in Oak Ridge. It was another to feel the cold steel biting into his own flesh. The cruiser finally pulled into the heavily fortified parking lot of the 4th Precinct. It was the largest and most notorious precinct in the city, known for its old-school aggressive policing tactics. Tanner slammed on the brakes, parked, and marched around to the back door. He hauled Donovan out by the arm, not caring as Donovan stumbled on the concrete. "Welcome to the hotel," Tanner sneered. "Let's get you booked, Mr. Mayor." He marched Donovan through the heavy reinforced glass doors and into the chaotic fluorescent-lit bullpen of the precinct. It was shift change. The room was packed with dozens of uniformed officers drinking coffee, typing reports, and loudly trading stories. The noise level was deafening. Tanner dragged Donovan toward the massive wooden booking desk. Behind it sat Sergeant Higgins, a grizzled veteran with a thick mustache who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "Morning, Sarge," Tanner announced loudly, making sure his voice carried over the din of the room. He wanted an audience. He wanted everyone to see him bringing in a suspect who thought he was tough. Got a live one for you. Refusal to ID loitering suspected casing for a burglary. Higgins didn't look up from his computer screen. Name. He claims his name is Donovan Hayes, Tanner said, pitching his voice louder, drawing chuckles from a few nearby officers. Says he's the new boss. But seeing as he's dressed like a vagrant and doesn't have a plastic card to prove it, I think we'll just book him as a John Doe for now. Higgins sighed and finally looked up. His eyes moved past Tanner, landing on the tall, broad-shouldered black man standing quietly in handcuffs. Higgins stopped breathing. The coffee cup he had been raising to his lips froze in mid-air. The color drained completely from his face, leaving his skin the color of old parchment. Tanner. Higgins whispered, his voice trembling so violently it was barely audible. Yeah, Sarge, let's get him fingerprinted. I want to see how many warrants this guy has. Tanner, shut your mouth! Higgins hissed, standing up so fast his heavy rolling chair slammed into the wall behind him. The loud bang of the chair echoed through the bullpen. Slowly the surrounding officers stopped talking. The clatter of keyboards ceased. One by one the cops in the room turned to look at the booking desk. Sarge, what's the problem? Tanner asked, finally noticing the absolute horror plastered across his superior's face. Higgins didn't answer Tanner. Instead, he rushed out from behind the high wooden desk, his hands shaking as he reached for the keys on his belt. He approached Donovan as if approaching a live bomb. Mr. Hayes, Higgins stammered, sweat immediately breaking out on his forehead. Sir, I don't know what to say. Tanner blinked, looking back and forth between his sergeant and the prisoner. Sarge, what are you doing? It's a bluff. He's just some guy off the street. At that exact moment, the heavy oak double doors leading to the administrative offices slammed open. Standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 detectives and a frantic-looking city manager, was Chief of Police William Brooks. The chief was fully dressed in his Class A uniform, and his face was twisted in a mixture of panic and pure, unadulterated rage. Chief Brooks's eyes swept the frozen bullpen instantly, locking onto the sight of Donovan Hayes, the man who was scheduled to be sworn in as his absolute superior in exactly 6 days, standing in the center of the precinct, wearing a dirty hoodie and locked in a pair of police-issue steel handcuffs. The entire precinct fell dead silent. You could hear a pin drop on the linoleum floor. Chief Brooks began to march across the room toward them, his boots echoing like a death knell. Tanner looked at the chief, then looked back at Donovan. For the first time since the morning began, the arrogant smirk melted off Tanner's face, replaced by a creeping, icy dread as the impossible reality began to dawn on him. Donovan looked Tanner dead in the eye. I told you, Donovan said, softly, his voice echoing in the silent room. I told you it was an unlawful arrest. Opening hook. What happens when a corrupt cop's daily abuse of power collides with the city's ultimate authority? A routine, racially motivated arrest turns into a career-ending nightmare when the man in handcuffs reveals his true identity. Watch as the newly elected mayor of Oak Ridge delivers cold, swift and absolute, undeniable justice. The air inside the 4th Precinct bullpen grew thick and suffocating, as if the oxygen had been entirely sucked out of the room. Chief William Brooks, a man who had built a 30-year reputation on maintaining ironclad control over his department, looked visibly ill. The shiny brass stars on his collar seemed to catch the harsh, fluorescent light mocking the absolute breakdown of order currently standing before him. Get those handcuffs off him, Chief Brooks ordered. His voice was not a shout, but a low, dangerous rumble that carried the weight of a highly compressed explosive. Right. This. Second. Sergeant Higgins fumbled with his belt, his thick fingers slipping against the metallic edges of his key ring. He moved toward Donovan Hayes with the frantic urgency of a man trying to defuse a bomb with seconds left on the timer. The sharp click of the unlocking mechanism sounded like a gunshot in the perfectly silent room. Donovan slowly brought his arms forward. He rolled his broad shoulders, wincing slightly, as blood rushed back into his extremities. He looked down at his wrists. Angry, deep red indentations circled his skin, a physical testament to the aggressive force Officer Gregory Tanner had applied. Donovan did not rub them. He simply held his hands up slightly, allowing the chief and every other officer in the room to see the undeniable physical marks of police brutality. "Mr. Mayor," Chief Brooks stammered, taking a hesitant step forward. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. "Sir, I cannot begin to express the absolute magnitude of this error. I offer my deepest, most profound apologies. This is an egregious violation of protocol, and I assure you it will be handled immediately." Tanner's brain finally caught up to the terrifying reality unfolding before him. The color completely drained from his perpetually flushed face, leaving him a sickly, pallid gray. His mouth opened and closed several times like a landed fish before any sound emerged. Chief Brooks." Tanner stammered, his gravelly voice, now completely devoid of its previous arrogant swagger. He pointed a trembling finger at Donovan. "He didn't have ID. He was loitering around the new West End Community Center, casing the building. He matched the description of a suspect. I was just doing my job following standard operating procedure." Donovan slowly turned his head to look at Tanner. The sheer intensity in the newly elected mayor's eyes made the veteran officer instinctively take a step backward. "Standard operating procedure." Donovan repeated his voice, echoing with the polished, devastating articulation of a courtroom prosecutor. "Is it standard operating procedure to approach a citizen who is standing still on a public sidewalk and immediately escalate to physical intimidation? Is it standard operating procedure to ignore a suspect's lack of resistance, physically assault them against the hood of a vehicle, and apply restraints with the deliberate intention of causing physical pain?" "You were resisting," Tanner lied, his voice pitching higher in a desperate panic. He looked around the bullpen, pleading for backup from his fellow officers, but everyone actively avoided his gaze. "You were non-compliant." "Officer Ben Miller," Donovan said, shifting his gaze to the young, terrified rookie who had just walked through the heavy precinct doors, still carrying Donovan's leather notebook. "You witnessed the entire interaction. Did I resist arrest? Did I raise my voice? Did I make any threatening movements toward Officer Tanner?" Miller froze. He looked at Tanner, his training officer, the man who evaluated his daily performance. Then he looked at Chief Brooks, whose eyes were boring holes into him. Finally, he looked at Donovan Hayes. "No, sir," Miller whispered, his voice shaking. He cleared his throat and spoke louder. "No, Mr. Mayor. You were completely compliant. You informed Officer Tanner of his lack of probable cause, and he shoved you, sir, before applying the cuffs." "You little rat," Tanner roared, stepping toward Miller with his fists clenched. "Stand down, Tanner!" Chief Brooks bellowed, his hand dropping to his duty belt. Two nearby detectives immediately stepped forward, grabbing Tanner by the arms and holding him back. "I am the mayor of Oak Ridge," Donovan said, projecting his voice so that every single person in the massive room could hear him. "But today I was just a man in a hoodie. I was a citizen of the West End, and I experienced exactly what the residents of that neighborhood have been complaining about for the last 15 years. Donovan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, which Tanner had neglected to search for or confiscate in his rush to make the arrest. He tapped the screen a few times. "I didn't just stumble upon your patrol route by accident, Officer Tanner," Donovan revealed, dropping a bombshell that sent a collective gasp through the room. "As part of my mayoral transition, I requested unredacted files from the Internal Affairs Division regarding officers with more than 5 excessive force complaints in the last decade. Your name, Gregory Tanner, was at the very top of that list. Tanner's knees physically buckled. The detectives holding his arms had to bear his weight to keep him standing. 32 complaints. Donovan continued reading directly from the digital file on his phone. 32 separate incidents of alleged racial profiling, excessive force, and unlawful detainment. And yet, due to union loopholes and administrative cowardice, you are still patrolling the streets. I went to the West End this morning, specifically to observe the policing in your district. I just didn't expect you to provide me with a first-hand demonstration quite so quickly. Chief Brooks looked utterly defeated. Mr. Mayor, I swear to you, the Union does not run this city. Chief, Donovan interrupted sharply. I do, and effective the moment I take my oath of office on Friday, the era of turning a blind eye to bad badges is over. Donovan pointed directly at Tanner. Officer Gregory Tanner, you are an absolute disgrace to the uniform you wear. You are a danger to the citizens you are sworn to protect. Chief Brooks turned to the desk sergeant. Higgins, strip him of his badge and his service weapon. Officer Tanner is suspended without pay, effective immediately pending a full criminal investigation by the State Attorney General's office. You can't do this, Tanner screamed as the detectives began removing his utility belt. I have 15 years on the force I protected this city. You're ruining my life over a misunderstanding. You ruined your own life, Gregory, Donovan replied coldly. You built a career on terrorizing people who you thought had no voice. You just finally picked on someone who does. 6 days later, the atmosphere in downtown Oak Ridge was entirely electric. Despite freezing November temperatures, thousands of citizens gathered in the plaza outside City Hall. The massive stone building was draped in patriotic bunting, and a large wooden stage had been erected on the wide concrete steps. Donovan Hayes stood at the podium, his right hand raised proudly, his left hand resting on a worn leather Bible held by his wife. He wore a sharply tailored navy blue suit, looking every inch the powerful, commanding leader he had been elected to be. And I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Mayor of Oak Ridge, so help me God. Donovan finished his voice, booming over the massive speaker system. The crowd erupted into deafening cheers. Donovan smiled, waving to the sea of faces, but his mind was already miles away, focused on the immense amount of work that lay ahead. The incident at the 4th Precinct had not been kept quiet. A civilian who had filmed the initial arrest on their smartphone had uploaded the footage to the internet. Within hours, the shocking video of the newly elected mayor being violently shoved and handcuffed by a known aggressive officer had gone incredibly viral, making national news headlines across the country. The sheer public outrage had provided Donovan with an unprecedented mandate for immediate sweeping reform. Sitting in the front row of the VIP section was Chief William Brooks. He looked significantly older than he had a week ago. Next to him sat Rookie Officer Ben Miller, wearing a pristine dress uniform. Miller had spent the last 3 days giving exhaustive depositions to federal investigators, completely breaking the precinct blue wall of silence. He had meticulously detailed Gregory Tanner and his long history of racial profiling, falsified reports, and quota-driven harassment. Because of Miller and his brave testimony, the State Attorney General had officially indicted Gregory Tanner on multiple felony counts, including deprivation of rights under color of law, aggravated assault, and official misconduct. Tanner was currently sitting in a cold county jail cell, completely denied bail awaiting a trial that promised to permanently end his freedom. Donovan stepped up to the microphones to deliver his inaugural address. He looked out over the diverse crowd, his eyes lingering on a large group of residents holding signs representing the West End neighborhood. Citizens of Oakridge. Donovan began, his voice resonant and deeply serious. We stand today at the precipice of a new era. For far too long, we have operated as a city divided. A city where the zip code you live in or the clothes you wear dictates the level of respect and protection you receive from the very institutions designed to serve you. He gripped the edges of the podium tightly. Many of you have seen the video of what happened to me last week in the West End. You saw a citizen stripped of his dignity, assaulted, and unlawfully detained. But I want you to understand something crucial. What happened to me was not an anomaly. It was a Tuesday. A heavy, poignant silence fell over the massive crowd. It was a Tuesday for the thousands of marginalized citizens who have endured that exact same treatment without the shield of a mayoral title to save them. Donovan continued, his voice rising in passionate intensity. That ends today. I am announcing the immediate formation of the West End Initiative. We are reallocating 15% of the police department budget directly into community outreach, mental health crisis intervention, teams, and independent civilian oversight. The crowd erupted again, the loud cheers echoing off the surrounding skyscrapers. Furthermore, Donovan said, looking directly at Chief Brooks and Officer Miller, we are implementing a strict zero-tolerance policy for excessive force. The badge is a symbol of public trust, not a license for personal tyranny. Those who honor the badge, like Officer Ben Miller, who bravely stood up for the truth, will be elevated and commended. Those who abuse it will be prosecuted to the absolute fullest extent of the law. Later that evening, Donovan stood quietly back in the West End. Uncapping his pen, he began to write the blueprints for change. If this incredible story of accountability and justice resonated with you today, please hit that like button and share this video to spread the important message. Subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss